Data architecture is one of the interesting or important things in Salesforce. So overall, when we are talking about data architecture, we are talking about everything around data in terms of how do we want to store the data, what sort of data model we are talking about, how do we plan for what data stays in Salesforce versus what data is kept outside the Salesforce, on platform, off platform, what sort of data archival strategy you have. So all these things combined together will basically formulate your data architecture, and it is very, very important. So you cannot keep on adding all sort of junk to your data, because then the entire system starts becoming pretty much irrelevant and meaningless.
Okay, so why can a beautifully written piece of code still fail if the underlying data model is bad?
Yeah, of course. I mean, if your data model is not good, that will have a lot of impact on, so the overall purpose, the core purpose of having Salesforce is basically to have a decision-making platform, a platform with very clear visibility. But if you have not built your data model correctly, then the code cannot help that, right? So code can only complement your well-designed, well-architected system, and that begins with a good data model. So if the data model itself is not very neatly designed, then of course the code cannot save that.
Okay, in your experience, what are the first data modeling mistakes you usually see in Salesforce projects?
A lot of those so data model mistakes, I would see a lot of places where so I'll basically talk about the overall picture. So data modeling, first of all, sometimes it is not done properly. I would see some places we have got repeated objects, so there is a redundancy in the objects unnecessarily created. There are objects created for things which could have been done with the fields or record types, etc. There are a lot of unused fields which I see in the data model. A lot of unused objects which are used or which are created. So I see there's a lot of lack of planning in the data model, and maybe lack of coordination between multiple teams. So different teams may be using different objects for the same purpose, which also starts impacting the overall data model. So I see a lot of these things in Salesforce.
Okay, diving a little deeper to this, how do you decide whether something should be a separate object, a field, or a relationship?
It's something which pretty much depends on a lot of requirement understanding. So if you understand the overall requirement, then things will become more easy. So these are not, of course, these are technical decisions, but the context or the reason for these decisions is connected to the understanding of the business process, etc. So sometimes we just have a picture of technical understanding, and we are not able to then make use of the right choice. We are not able to make the right choice in terms of whether it should be an object, a field, or a relationship, that sort of thing. So if you understand the business process properly, if you understand the business requirements properly, you will be able to ease out the entire process of making these decisions. For example, now if I say that, okay, fine, there is a let me take an example, that there is a system which has got a lot of stores. Now for stores, you have kept I would say a separate object you have created for stores, let's say, and now you have got another data input, let's say in which city the store is located. Right now, there's a possibility for you to basically, I'm just giving an example. So you may want to create a separate object for the city. So that's one option, and then that relationship gets created. Or you may want to work with just a pick list. Now it all depends on how many cities are we working with, how it would be handled. So city and store is just one example that I took. But yeah, if you are dealing with say 50, 60, 100 records in total, making a different object may not make sense. But at the same time, if we are working with 10,000 records at the parent level, then making a field may not make that much of a sense. So we'll have to understand, we'll have to strike the right balance to ensure the users are also not impacted. We do not want a system where the life of the user becomes very difficult, and at the same time we also want to ensure that the system is not overburdened by just to make things easier for the user. So yeah, we have to balance out.
Okay, what happens when a company keeps adding custom fields and objects without thinking about the bigger data model?
Nothing happens instantly, but eventually when the overall size of the implementation grows, then they start running into the limits, and then that's where they need to plan. They get blocked. I have come across a lot of companies or implementations where they have built so many custom fields over the years, and then there are like 500, 600 fields per object, and when you have that kind of number of fields per object, then you of course have challenges with a lot of things. And in most of the cases, at least what I have seen, in any object, if you have say 500, 600 fields, most of these fields are not relevant, not being used. A lot of these fields you will not see that there is any data. Maybe the field was used for some time, and then that business process stopped, and then no one is now bothered about that particular field. Not neither that is being used for that particular business process, but it is consuming one of the field space there. So yeah, so instantly nothing will happen. Salesforce allows you to create fields, objects very easily, and that's something which a lot of us keep on doing. But as your implementation grows, then it will definitely start creating a lot of trouble for you. Then cleanup becomes one additional project for a lot of companies.
Okay. So how does bad data architecture affect flow, Apex, reporting, integration, and performance?
It would affect everything. Yeah. So if your data architecture is not right, so your automations, integrations, everything will get impacted. For example, if you do not have a data archival strategy, if you do not have right sort of I would say details, or the indexing is not done properly, then what will happen if your automations which are querying the data, your reporting which is querying the data, your integrations which need to pull data for other systems, etc., everything will get impacted. You will unnecessarily end up querying, pulling a lot of data which is not even relevant for you. So good data architecture, as I said, does not only mean the data model. It also means that you have an archival strategy in place, you have a plan for indexed fields, etc. So those things are very important. So if that is not the case, then of course overall performance of all these querying will get impacted.
Okay. At what time does a Salesforce organization become difficult to scale because of its data architecture?
Say if you have overall data per object, I would try to give a number to you as well for this one. So if your per object data is somewhere between say a few thousands to a few hundred thousands, that's manageable. Data architecture still matters there, but possibly will not start impacting your performance at say 200, 300,000 records at an object. But the moment you have say a million record in an object, in any one of the objects, or more than million records in an object, that's where you really need to be cautious about a very good data architecture. Otherwise it will start impacting all the performance of everything, including reports, automations, integrations, everything will get to start getting impacted.
Can good architecture actually eliminate the need for a lot of custom code?
Not necessarily. Good architecture, actually the other way around. So the purpose of a good architecture is to reduce the need of a lot of custom coding, and to work with a lot of out-of-the-box features, functionalities provided by Salesforce. So good architecture does not need, and this is something which I would definitely want to call out, it's a myth, and a good architecture should always try to reduce the amount of code that is needed, and not increase the amount of code.
Okay. What should a beginner learn about data architecture before they start writing serious epics?
Yeah, so I think everything around data is important to be understood. So at a beginner level, understanding Salesforce limitations, those are very important things. Understanding the concept of indexed fields, etc., that is important. Understanding what are the options or tools available from Salesforce to manage large chunk of data. Like if we are talking about coding, it has to be batch epics, asynchronous epics, asynchronous processing of data. Those are important aspects. If you're talking about data archival, if you're talking about reporting, understanding skinny tables, data skews, understanding big objects, where those can be used, and where do we take a decision in terms of keeping the data on cloud versus off cloud. So those things, a lot of these things, it's always good to learn these things, and this will definitely make you a good developer. At the same time, you also have a architect's perspective.
Okay, lastly, what's one data architecture principle you wish every Salesforce developer understood?
One data architecture principle every developer understood. I wish every developer understood. Yeah, so I think one of the key principles that needs to be understood is that Salesforce is a platform. Building anything is not very difficult, it's very easy, but at the same time it comes with its own limitations. So the most important thing that anyone needs to understand is to understand those limitations and try and learn how to work with those limitations, be it in terms of number of objects, number of fields, be it in terms of how much data can be stored, or how the queries are written, how the DMLs are processed. So all these things are very important. So if I have to talk about one principle, of course, understand that Salesforce is a platform, understand that it has got limitations, try and understand those limitations and try to learn to work with those limitations. So that's one principle that I would suggest everyone.
Yeah, that's all for today. Thank you.
Thank you.